I absolutely love fishing a crankbait. It's one of my favorite things to do, and throughout the years I have caught probably tens of thousands of fish up to this point on a crankbait. It is just a tool that I've got tied on from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, from cold water to warm water. I've got shallow running square bill crankbaits all the way down to 25-foot divers. I love fishing a crankbait. It's the reason I have 5 crankbait rods in my boat. I know it's excessive, but like I said, I absolutely love fishing a crankbait. Now, the thing about fishing a crankbait for a lot of people is, if you're anything like I used to be, I used to be a budget angler. I still am a budget angler. I say that I'm not, but fortunately, I get to work with awesome companies that send me rods and reels to use. But even then, still, I try to, shop, quote unquote, in a budget way, because the budget is kind of where a lot of people are fishing at. Not everybody has the money to go out and buy technique-specific rods and reels, and those things that it cost a little bit more money. You get into more technique-specific stuff, you're going to be talking about rods that could cost anywhere from $300 to $500. And the thing is, with a crankbait, I will say that if there's going to be 1 or 2 techniques that you invest into specific gear for it, a crankbait rod would be one of those. But you cannot invest into that, and there's a couple of adjustments that you can make to your current rod and reel setups to make them into quote unquote cranking rods. So let's talk about the cranking setup. What is a specific cranking setup that if you guys wanted to go out and buy one, you would invest your money into? So for me, I'm looking for either a glass or a composite rod. And so what do I mean by that? So a glass rod is like a fiberglass rod that has a fiberglass material in it. It's going to have a really good parabolic bend. And so some of you guys have probably seen some of my shorts, or I load up into a fish and that rod bends all the way to the last guide. That is a glass cranking rod or a composite cranking rod. That rod is made to do that specific thing. And so a lot of people think that I'm just absolutely jacking that fish's face, but in reality what I'm doing is I'm loading that crankbait rod up and I'm letting that rod do its job of just really driving those treble hooks into that fish's face and being able to get a good hook into that fish and get them into the boat. And then for a reel, I prefer a 6-gear ratio reel. Biggest reason for that, anecdotal experience throughout my life, I just like a 6-gear ratio reel. It's what I've always used. It's what I have a ton of confidence in. It allows me to work that bait without overworking that bait, as well as having a little bit more torque so that you can work some of those bigger baits a lot easier. And then the second reason being is, Kevin Van Dam said the same exact thing that I just said. He's always used it. It's his confidence. And I guess a lot of you guys know who KVD is and know that he is the crankbait master of the world. And so if it's good enough for KVD, it's good enough for Alex Rubb. And then normally I run anywhere from 10 to 15 pound fluorocarbon depending on the job that I'm doing. 10 for my deeper divers and baits that I'm wanting to get to the deepest depth that I possibly can, because that thinner line diameter is going to be able to dive to those depths. And then some of that 15 pound test is going to be stuff for my square bills, where I'm just grinding it through rocks and trees and things like that, and I'm going to be tearing that line up, and I want that little bit thicker diameter just to help me to put some of those fish into the boat. And so that's kind of my ideal crankbait setup. I've got a bunch of them, a bunch of different lengths, a bunch of different powers, but they all have that really parabolic bend, and they really load up down deep in the blank because I'm wanting them to do the job that they're made to do, which is stick fish with crankbait hooks. Now, for you guys that don't have a specific crankbait rod, or you don't have the money to invest into a specific crankbait rod right now, I'm going to make it super easy on you guys. Get some monofilament. You get anywhere from a 10 to 15 pound monofilament. That monofilament is going to have a lot more stretch than a braid or a fluorocarbon wheel. It's just the nature of that line. And what you can do is you can put some monofilament on something like a 7-foot medium heavy, or any rod that you have in your arsenal, your kind of general purpose rod. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow that line to stretch, and the stretch in that line is going to kind of emulate the bend in those more parabolic rods. And so if you're fishing crankbaits and you say, hey Alex, right now I've only got the money for my 7-foot medium heavy rod and my 7-gear ratio reel, put some mono on that reel and throw a crankbait on that. And you can still use it for, throwing your Texas rigs and stuff like that. You're going to lose a little bit of sensitivity and add a little bit of stretch to that line, but it's still going to be able to put fish in the boat. When I was a kid, my dad only bought monofilament and copolymer because we were fishing very affordably. We couldn't buy the more expensive stuff. I was still able to put fish in the boat with a Texas rig just like I could with a crankbait, and have a rod that could do a lot of different jobs really, really well. And then if you're fishing that 7-gear ratio reel, just slow it down a little bit. That's all you got to do. Me, I'm like an ADHD squirrel on crack, so I get out there and I'm like cranking and going and cranking and going. So the 6-gear ratio helps me to slow down. But if you guys are throwing the 7-gear ratio, just be conscious of how fast you're reeling that thing and just slow that reel speed down just a little bit. And that, in combination with that mono, can take a rod that's not a crankbait rod and turn it into a crankbait rod if you can't afford to go and buy a crankbait rod right now. Now, I'll make sure and link my favorite crankbait setup down below so you guys can go check it out. And if you want to see some crankbait fishing in action, click this video that's popping up right here.